I got the email on a scorching Thursday afternoon, the kind of day when the air shimmers off the desert sand and every breath tastes like dust and heat. I'd been deployed in Iraq for almost 6 months, pulling double shifts as a sergeant in the 173rd Airborne. When I saw the notification pop up on my battered laptop, I thought it was just another credit card bill or one of those endless military benefits updates. But the subject line stopped me cold. Let's be adults about this. I clicked it open. 3 sentences. That's all she gave me. 3 sentences to end a 12-year marriage. I filed for divorce. I've emptied our joint account. I've moved Daniel into our house. Let's keep this civil. I sat there blinking at the screen. My mind scrambled to catch up, but my body just reacted. I closed the laptop, stood up, and walked straight to the showers. Cold water. The kind that shocks your system and makes you feel something other than the slow, suffocating weight in your chest. When I got back to my bunk, I typed a single word in response: understood. That was it. No begging, no angry rant, no pleading for explanations. Just that one word. I hit send, closed the laptop again, and sat there, the dull hum of the bass generators vibrating through the metal frame of my cot. James, my bunkmate, glanced over. "You good man?" he asked, not looking up from his dog-eared copy of some Tom Clancy novel. I forced a nod. "Yeah, just some family stuff." He didn't press. In the Army, you learn to respect the walls a guy builds around himself. Everyone has their own private hell. Looking back, I should have seen this coming. The signs were there if I'd cared to notice. A year before my deployment, Emily started acting different. At first, it was just the small things. New clothes, a sudden interest in spin classes, and a strict keto diet she swore by. Then it escalated to late nights at her new job, vague answers when I asked about her day, and a sudden need for privacy. Passwords on her phone, muted conversations in the kitchen. I'd been too busy prepping for deployment, too focused on my squad and their readiness to see the cracks forming in my own foundation. I ignored the nagging voice in the back of my mind, the one whispering that something felt off. I still remember the night I left. She drove me to the airport, barely slowing down for a goodbye hug. I caught the faint whiff of cologne on her jacket, one I didn't own, and I brushed it off as nothing. "Stay safe, okay?" she said, her eyes already looking past me like she was mentally moving on before I'd even boarded the plane. "Always," I replied, squeezing her shoulder one last time. I walked into the terminal, my rucksack bouncing against my back, trying to convince myself that this was just a rough patch, that we'd work it out when I got home. I had time to think after that email. Long nights in a guard tower watching the horizon through the heat haze, my mind cycling through memories like a broken film reel. I remembered when we first met, the 4th of July BBQ at my buddy Kyle's place. She'd been in a sundress, her laugh louder than the firecrackers, her eyes bright in the twilight. We'd talked about everything and nothing, our fingers sticky with barbecue sauce, and our futures stretched out ahead of us like the empty summer sky. We got married a year later. Small ceremony, just close friends and family. She'd worn a thrifted lace dress, and I'd borrowed a suit from my brother. We said our vows under a cheap, creaky arch that Kyle had built from scrapwood, and I thought that moment would last forever. But forever had turned out to be 12 years. 12 years reduced to 3 cold, detached sentences. 2 weeks after her email, I was sitting in the mess hall trying to choke down another bland MRE when my phone buzzed. Another notification from our bank. I hesitated before swiping it open. 500,000 withdrawn. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. The joint account was almost empty. I felt my pulse thud in my ears, the metal bench suddenly too cold beneath me. I pulled up the transaction history. It was all there. A slow bleed of small withdrawals over the past few months, escalating into one massive transfer to an account I didn't recognize. James looked over. "Bad news." I forced a shrug, locking my phone. "Nah, just some account stuff, nothing I can't handle." He grunted and went back to his book, but I could feel the shift. The slow sinking realization that Emily hadn't just left me, she'd gutted me financially too. She hadn't even waited for the ink to dry on the divorce papers before bleeding me dry. That night I sat in the cramped phone booth at the base, staring at the scratched-up receiver like it might explode in my hand. I dialed our bank, the sterile automated voice guiding me through a maze of options until I finally reached a human. "Yes, sir. It appears those withdrawals were made by a joint account holder," the rep said, her tone painfully neutral. "I can't reverse them without a police report." I hung up without another word. When I got back to my cot, I didn't sleep. I just lay there staring at the metal crossbeams above me, feeling the desert wind shake the thin walls of our barracks. She'd taken everything, my savings, my stability, my sense of home. I felt hollow, like someone had ripped the core out of me and left the shell behind. But the thing about being stripped down to nothing is that you stop being afraid of losing. I wasn't broken, not yet. And if she thought I'd just roll over and take this, she had no idea who she was dealing with. Because I might not start fights, but I damn well finish them. After that night, I started paying closer attention. I logged into every account we'd ever shared, combing through statements, cross-checking transfers, and hunting for any sign of what she'd been up to. It felt like picking through the ashes of a burned-down house, searching for the pieces of a life I hadn't realized was already over. That's when I noticed the pattern. The withdrawals hadn't started small like I first thought. No, they'd been calculated. A few hundred here, 1,000 there, spaced out just enough to avoid triggering any flags. But right after my deployment, she'd gone for the jugular. Thousands every few days of full-on financial gutting while I was halfway across the world. I dug deeper, scrolling back through our bank app until I hit the start date. She'd made the first suspicious transfer the day after I left. I could almost picture it. Her sitting at our kitchen table, the same one we picked out at a yard sale that summer, after our wedding, transferring our savings to another account without so much as a second thought. I clenched my fist, feeling the old anger start to boil up. I wasn't even mad about the money, not really. It was the betrayal, the way she'd made these choices without a single word to me, the way she'd cut me out of my own life. I'd been thousands of miles away dodging sandstorms and sniper fire, and she'd been draining the only safety net we had. 2 days later, I managed to get some time on a secure line. I called my old buddy Mark, a lawyer back in the States. He picked up on the second ring, his voice groggy. "Alex, man, it's 3 a.m. here. Everything okay?" I took a deep breath, the dry desert air scratching at my throat. "I need your help, Mark. It's Emily." She emptied our accounts, moved her new boyfriend into my house, and served me divorce papers over email. I need to know my options. There was a long pause, the line crackling with static. "Jesus, man, I'm sorry. Okay, listen, first thing, do not respond to her directly. Don't give her any ammo. Let me dig into this. I'll check the property deed, the joint account rights, all of it. Just sit tight and I'll get back to you." I hung up, feeling a flicker of something close to hope. Maybe I wasn't as alone in this as I'd thought. Maybe I still had a few moves left to play. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, listening to the muffled sounds of the bass, the distant hum of generators, the occasional clatter of metal as someone dropped a piece of gear. My mind kept spinning, replaying 1,000 tiny moments from the past few years, moments that suddenly made a twisted kind of sense. I remembered the weekend trips she'd started taking, the mysterious girls' nights that stretched into the next morning, the texts she'd swipe away when I walked into the room. I'd brushed it off as stress or the slow drift of two people growing apart, but now I saw it for what it was. A slow, deliberate disengagement, like a pilot shutting down engines one by one before bailing out. I felt the anger start to harden into something colder, something sharper. I didn't just want my money back, I wanted my dignity. I wanted her to understand that I wasn't some oblivious fool she could walk all over. 2 weeks later, Mark called me back. His tone was clipped, all business. "All right, Alex, here's the deal. Your name's still the only one on the house deed thanks to the VA loan. That's good news, but the joint account? That's trickier. She has every legal right to those funds unless we can prove fraud or coercion. I need you to get me copies of every bank statement, every transfer, every email you can find. If she forged your signature on anything, we've got a case." I felt a flicker of hope, a faint glow in the darkness. "Thanks, man. I'll pull what I can and send it over." He hesitated. "Alex, this might get ugly. She's already moved a guy into your house. This isn't just a messy breakup. This is full-on betrayal. Are you ready for that?" I didn't hesitate. "Yeah, I'm ready." Over the next week, I became a man possessed. Any downtime I had, I spent combing through emails, old photos, text messages, anything that might help me piece together just how long she'd been planning this. I even pulled up the security footage from the cameras I'd installed around our property, something Emily probably forgot I could still access from my laptop. The first time I logged in, I felt a jolt of white-hot rage. There he was, Daniel, some mid-30s wannabe alpha male with a sleeve of tattoos and a jawline sharp enough to cut glass, lounging on my couch, drinking beer from my fridge and walking my dog. But the part that really got me, Emily sitting beside him, her feet tucked up under her like she used to do when we'd binge-watch Netflix together, laughing at something. He set her head resting on his shoulder. That image burned itself into my mind. It was one thing to know your marriage was over, it was another to see your life replaced in real time. The next morning, I woke up with a clearer head. If she thought she could just erase me from my own life, she had another thing coming. I wasn't going to just take this lying down. I made a list tapping each item into my phone's notepad app. Freeze joint accounts, minimize further damage, contact the bank, verify if any signatures were forged, pull security footage, start building a timeline, compile every email, text, and call log, find the cracks, stay quiet, don't tip her off. I saved the note and took a deep breath, the tightness in my chest easing just a little. I'd been on the back foot for too long, reacting to her moves, letting her control the narrative. That ended now. I might be 6,000 miles away, but I still had leverage. I still had my pride. And if she thought I was just going to roll over and let her take everything, she didn't know me at all. A few days after that call with Mark, I got another notification. This time it wasn't my bank account draining like a bathtub with the plug pulled. It was a small, unexpected deposit into the secret account I'd set up months before my deployment, a rainy day fund I'd hoped never to need. I checked the source. Military benefits. My heart rate slowed a bit. At least something was still going right. I transferred most of it into a fresh account at a completely different bank, one Emily wouldn't know about, just in case she decided to get greedy again. Then I started making my moves. First, I pulled every file I had access to. Birth certificates, marriage license, tax returns, pay stubs, anything that might matter in a divorce. I scanned them all, backed them up to a secure encrypted cloud drive, and then stashed the originals in a metal lockbox at the base. If Emily wanted to try and blindside me, she was in for a nasty surprise. Next, I reached out to a few old army buddies who'd transitioned into civilian life. One of them, Kyle, had ended up in IT security. Another, David, had gone into private investigations after his stint in military intelligence. They owed me a few favors, and I intended to cash them in. Kyle, I need you to do a deep dive on someone, I said, my voice low as I ducked into the far corner of the mess hall. Her new boyfriend, name's Daniel, lives in my house apparently. Kyle snorted. Messy man. You sure you want to go down this road? I don't just want to, I said, feeling the old steel in my spine harden. I need to. All right, send me what you've got. I'll see what I can dig up. A week later, Kyle got back to me. He'd gone full Black Ops on Daniel's digital footprint, and what he found was a gold mine of petty small-time dirt. The guy had 3 previous DUI arrests, 2 of which had conveniently disappeared from the public record, likely the work of a good lawyer or a few well-placed bribes. He also had a failed landscaping business and a stack of unpaid debts that made my stomach churn just thinking about it. But the real kicker? He was still married. Not just divorced and playing house with my wife, actively married with 2 kids in a different state. Kyle sent me a PDF of the marriage certificate along with a list of recent credit card transactions. Daniel had been using my joint account money to fund vacations, bar tabs, and a down payment on a Harley he probably couldn't even afford the insurance for. I felt a sick sort of satisfaction. Finally, a crack in the perfect life he and Emily were trying to build on my back. I didn't just sit on that information. I sent the marriage certificate and a few choice transaction records to his wife, a woman named Lisa, who, judging by her Facebook posts, had no idea her husband was living a double life. I kept the message short and to the point. Hi Lisa, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I thought you deserved to know the truth about your husband. Attached are some documents that might interest you. Stay strong. I didn't expect a response, but 3 days later my inbox pinged. Thank you for this, I had no idea. If there's anything I can do to help you, please let me know. I'm sorry you're going through this too. Lisa. I leaned back in my chair, the metal frame creaking beneath me. One more piece of the puzzle falling into place. Next, I needed to lock down my house. Mark had been right. My name was still the only one on the deed thanks to the VA loan. That meant I had leverage. I called the county recorder's office, filed a formal affidavit of ownership, and requested a freeze on any further liens or transfers. Emily might have moved Daniel in, but legally she was just a squatter. Then I reached out to David, the private investigator. I needed him to find out just how deep this rabbit hole went. Can you pull me everything you can find on Emily's finances? I asked him over a crackling satellite connection. Bank accounts, credit cards, even phone records if you can swing it. David grunted. Gonna cost you. I'll make it worth your while. Just get it done. 2 weeks later, David came through. He'd managed to pull Emily's recent financials, and what he found made my blood run cold. She hadn't just emptied our joint account. She'd also taken out a second mortgage on our house, forged my signature on the documents, and funneled the money into a shell company registered under Daniel's name. That's when I realized this wasn't just a messy divorce. This was fraud. Full-blown, legally actionable fraud. And I had the receipts. I spent that night piecing together a timeline matching dates from my deployment with the withdrawals, the fake mortgage, and the shell company's transactions. I saved every file to a secured drive, backed it up to a second cloud account, and made 3 separate copies on encrypted thumb drives. Then I sent everything to Mark along with a single line in the email. Time to go to war. The next morning, I got a call from Mark. "Jesus, Alex," he said, his voice sounding almost impressed. "You've got enough here to bury them both. This isn't just divorce court material, this is federal wire fraud, identity theft, and forgery. We're talking prison time." I felt a dark, grim satisfaction settling into my bones. "Good, let's hit them where it hurts." Mark chuckled. "You got it, I'll start the paperwork. Sit tight and let me work my magic." I hung up, my heart thudding in my chest. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had the upper hand. That night, I logged back into my home security system. I watched Daniel pull into my driveway, park his shiny new Harley, and walk into my house like he owned the place. Emily met him at the door, wrapping her arms around his neck and laughing as he lifted her off the ground. I didn't feel rage, I didn't feel heartbreak. I just felt cold. I hit the record button, capturing every second of their little domestic scene. They had no idea they were building their own prison, one smug stolen kiss at a time. And I intended to lock the door behind them when they finally realized it. A few days after Mark started filing the paperwork, I got a message from Lisa, Daniel's unsuspecting wife. "Hey Alex, just wanted to let you know I've hired a divorce attorney. Thank you for giving me the push I needed. If you need me to testify or share any documents, just say the word. Also, Daniel's been blowing up my phone swearing he's innocent. I'm not buying it, but I thought you should know." I smiled, feeling the first real warmth in my chest in weeks. Daniel was scrambling, and that meant cracks would start to form. People like him, narcissists who live off manipulation and deception, fall apart the moment they lose control of the narrative. That same night, I logged into my home security feed again. It had become a ritual, watching them through the cold, unblinking eye of the cameras I'd installed years ago, long before this nightmare started. I caught Daniel stumbling into my house at 2 a.m., his steps uneven, one hand bracing against the doorframe. Emily came rushing down the stairs, her face twisted in concern. She helped him into the kitchen, where he slumped onto one of the bar stools, clutching his head. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could guess. His world was starting to crumble, and he had nowhere to turn. I watched as he pounded a fist against the counter, his lips moving in what I imagined were panicked explanations. Emily's shoulders stiffened, and she stepped back, her arms crossing defensively. Whatever illusion they'd built around their stolen life was starting to fracture. The next day, I reached out to David again. "Hey, you still got those contacts in the DMV?" I asked, pacing the narrow stretch of concrete behind the mess hall. David chuckled. "Yeah, what do you need? Find out if Daniel's been using my address for anything. Registrations, insurance, whatever. I want to know if he's trying to tie himself to my property. Consider it done." 3 days later, David sent me a text with a screenshot. "Bingo, he registered his Harley to your address. Also found a recent DMV update. Looks like he tried to use your house as his permanent residence for a driver's license renewal." I felt my teeth grind together. That was enough to make my blood boil. He wasn't just living in my house, he was trying to anchor himself legally to my property. I sent the screenshot to Mark. His reply came back a few minutes later. "Perfect. We'll add this to the civil suit. It shows intent to establish residency, which means we can hit him for trespassing and illegal occupancy once you're stateside." With that in motion, I turned my attention back to Emily. She was harder to pin down, more careful but not flawless. I pulled every email, text, and call log I had access to, piecing together a timeline that painted a clear picture of her betrayal. I found dozens of messages between her and Daniel, some stretching back almost 2 years. They'd been planning this long before I deployed. They'd traded fantasies about their new life without me, their plans to sell my house and start fresh somewhere sunny. My stomach twisted at some of the messages. The casual cruelty, the way they joked about my deployments, the months I'd spent halfway around the world while they played house with my money. I saved every screenshot, every digital whisper of their betrayal. It all went into the file I was building, a digital war chest that I intended to crack open when the time was right. One morning, just as the sun was breaking over the horizon, I got a call from Mark. "Alex, I've got some good news," he said, his voice sounding lighter than I'd heard it in weeks. "I filed the preliminary paperwork for the divorce and the fraud charges. The court issued an immediate freeze on the house and all associated accounts. They can't touch a dollar or move a stick of furniture without risking a contempt charge." I closed my eyes, letting the relief wash over me. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but it felt like the first solid ground I'd stood on in months. "Thanks, Mark. I owe you one." Just make it back stateside in one piece and we'll call it even. That night, I logged back into the security feed, half expecting to see Emily and Daniel packing their bags, their little scheme blown wide open. But instead, I saw them sitting on the back porch drinking wine like nothing had changed. It was surreal watching them relax on my patio, their legs stretched out, the dog curled up at their feet. I felt a surge of cold, hard resolve. They had no idea what was coming. I started laying the final groundwork. I called the bank, filed fraud claims on every account Emily had touched, and demanded an audit of the mortgage she'd taken out without my consent. I also filed a police report attaching copies of the forged signatures, the fake mortgage papers, and the shell company details I'd dug up. I copied every file to a secure drive and sent a second set to Mark along with a message. If anything happens to me, push this to the FBI. Then I made one last move. I called Lisa again, the one person who might be willing to burn it all down just to watch Daniel's life go up in flames. Lisa, it's Alex. I have a proposal. She hesitated. Okay, what's on your mind? Daniel's been living in my house using my money and trying to establish residency. I'm going to force him out, but I need leverage. Are you willing to help? There was a long silence on the line, broken only by the faint hum of static. Yeah, she said finally, her voice steady. Yeah, I'm in. I hung up feeling the pieces finally falling into place. I'd gone from blindsided husband to strategist, from victim to hunter. And as I stared at the grainy black and white image of Daniel and Emily laughing on my porch, I felt a cold, fierce satisfaction. I didn't just want my life back. I wanted theirs to burn. A week later, I touched down in the States. I didn't tell Emily or Daniel I was coming home. I didn't even tell my closest friends. I just grabbed a rental car at the airport and drove straight to a small no-name motel on the edge of town, checking in under an alias. I wanted to watch the collapse from a safe distance. First stop was Mark's office. He looked up as I walked in, his eyes going wide. Alex, man, you look like hell, he said, standing up to shake my hand. I managed a tight grin. War does that to a guy. We spent the next 2 hours going over everything. The divorce papers, the fraud charges, the forged mortgage, the illegal residency. I watched his face tighten as he flipped through the file I'd compiled, his jaw clenching and unclenching like a man trying to chew through steel. This is enough to ruin them both, he said, leaning back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. You ready to pull the trigger? I nodded, feeling the familiar weight of a mission well planned. Do it. The next morning I drove past my own house. The sight of it made my stomach twist. The lawn was overgrown, the front porch cluttered with empty beer bottles and a crumpled motorcycle cover. My dog, my loyal old shepherd Max, was lying on the porch, his tail giving a half-hearted thump as I slowed down. I felt a fresh wave of rage roll through me. They hadn't just taken my home, they'd neglected everything that mattered to me, right down to my damn dog. I pulled over a block away, parked behind a clump of overgrown bushes, and pulled out my laptop. I tapped into the security feed, watching as Daniel stumbled out of the house, rubbing his eyes and scratching his bare chest. He looked like a man who hadn't had a decent night's sleep in weeks. Good. I hit the record button, capturing every second as he pulled out his phone, swore at something on the screen, and stormed back inside. That afternoon, I met Lisa in a small coffee shop on the edge of town. She looked rough, bags under her eyes, fingers trembling around her mug, but there was a hard set to her jaw that told me she was past the point of tears. Thanks for meeting me, I said, sliding into the booth across from her. She gave a tight nod. I'm only here because I want to see him suffer. You understand that, right? I chuckled. Perfectly. We spent the next hour going over the plan. Lisa had dug up a treasure trove of incriminating messages, bank statements, and voicemails that painted Daniel as the cheating, lying parasite he was. We agreed to hit them from both sides. I'd move in with the legal action and she'd bury them in personal hell. That night I made my move. I called the police, filed a formal trespassing complaint, and sent them every piece of evidence I had that Daniel was squatting in my house without my consent. Then I hit up the county clerk's office and filed a temporary restraining order against him, citing his illegal residency and fraudulent use of my address. The next morning, I got a call from a very nervous-sounding sheriff's deputy. Mr. Evans, we served the papers this morning. Your wife's boyfriend was not happy. I smiled, picturing the scene. Daniel standing in his underwear on my front porch, sputtering as the cops handed him the eviction notice and a court summons. Thanks, officer, I said, my voice tight with suppressed laughter. I appreciate it. I wasn't done. I drove past my house again that afternoon, parking in the same spot behind the bushes. I watched as Daniel's truck peeled out of the driveway, the engine growling like a cornered animal. I could hear him cursing as he sped off his tires, kicking up a spray of gravel. I waited a few minutes, then walked up to my front door. I rang the bell. Emily opened it, her eyes going wide, her face draining of color as she took in the sight of me standing on the front steps. Alex?" She stammered, her hand clutching the doorframe like she might pass out. I felt a dark, fierce satisfaction bloom in my chest. "Hey, Em, mind if I come in?" She stepped back, her mouth working soundlessly like a fish on dry land. I stepped inside, letting the door swing shut behind me. The house reeked of stale beer and burned food, the floors sticky under my boots. I looked around, my eyes catching on the dented drywall, the cracked picture frames, the trash-strewn countertops. My stomach turned, but I forced myself to keep moving. I walked into the living room, pausing to scratch Max behind the ears as he thumped his tail weakly against the floor. Emily hovered behind me, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her crumbling world together. "Nice place you've got here," I said, my voice dripping with mock admiration. "Really cozy." She opened her mouth, but I cut her off with a sharp wave of my hand. "Save it. I'm not here to talk about us. I'm here to give you a choice." Her eyes darted toward the door, but I stepped to the side, blocking her path. "You're going to pack your things, leave my house, and sign whatever papers my lawyer sends your way. You're going to walk away from my life, my money, and my property without a fight. Because if you don't, I'll bury you and your little boyfriend in so much legal trouble, you'll be digging yourselves out for the next decade." She opened her mouth to protest, but I took a step closer, my voice dropping to a low, deadly whisper. "I have every text, every email, every bank statement. I know about the forged mortgage. I know about the shell company. I even know about the second phone you keep hidden in the bottom drawer of my nightstand." Her face went pale, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "So what's it going to be?" "Emily," I asked, straightening up, my gaze never leaving her trembling form. "Do you want to do this the hard way or the easy way?" She didn't respond, just stood there, her lips moving silently as tears started to stream down her cheeks. "Good choice," I said, stepping back. "Now get out of my house." An hour later, I watched from my truck as she stumbled down the front steps, a hastily packed duffel bag slung over her shoulder. She paused at the end of the driveway, looking back at the house like she might turn around and try to plead her case. I met her eyes through the windshield, my expression as cold and hard as the desert nights I'd just come back from. She looked away, her shoulders slumping, and kept walking. I waited until she disappeared around the corner before stepping out of the truck and walking up to my front door. I took a deep breath, feeling the warm sun on my face, the solid weight of the keys in my hand. Then I stepped inside, locked the door behind me, and let the silence wash over me. And that was it. I had my life back. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt free. Story 2. I never thought I'd hear those words come out of my mother's mouth. It was supposed to be a peaceful family dinner, one of those rare moments where everyone pretends to care. I had bought the house, paid the bills, kept everyone comfortable, and yet there she was at the head of the table, saying I never gave them anything but headaches. The words hit me harder than I could admit. The room fell into a heavy, awkward silence, as if no one wanted to be the first to acknowledge the bombshell. My uncle stirred his coffee. My aunt shifted in her seat, and my cousins suddenly found their phones fascinating. Nobody spoke up for me, not a single one. My hands clenched under the table, nails digging into my palms. I wasn't going to let them see me break. "That's not fair, Mom." I finally managed, keeping my voice steady. "I pay for everything, this house, the bills, the food. I've made sure you never had to worry about money." She didn't even blink. "And you never let us forget it," she snapped back. "You act like you're doing us a favor, but a real daughter wouldn't keep score." A real daughter. The phrase sank into my bones. I swallowed the knot in my throat and let my eyes move around the table. My brother Kevin leaned back with his arms crossed, his face unreadable. His wife Sarah kept her gaze fixed on her plate. My cousins kept their heads down. Not one person spoke up for me. I couldn't take it anymore. I pushed my chair back and stood up, the legs scraping against the hardwood floor. "Okay," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. My mother frowned. "Okay, what?" "Okay," I repeated, forcing myself to meet her gaze. "If my help is such a burden, I won't burden you anymore. I'm done paying for this house, done covering your bills, done funding this entire family while being treated like an outsider." The room tensed. My mother's mouth opened as if to protest, but no words came out. Kevin finally sat forward. "Hold on, you don't mean that." I shook my head. "You all just sat there and let her say that to me. You all acted like I was nothing. So fine, let's see how you do without me." I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, my heart pounding so loudly I couldn't hear anything else. As I stepped outside, the cold air hit me like a slap, and I couldn't help the way my hands shook. I'd done it, finally drawn a line. But why did it feel so hollow? Sitting in my car, I gripped the steering wheel, trying to catch my breath. The panic started to set in. My phone buzzed. A message from Mom. "Come back inside. You're overreacting." Then another from Kevin. "What are you doing? You can't just walk out like that." I powered off my phone and drove away. For the next few days, I didn't hear from them. No calls, no texts. The silence was suffocating, but I didn't dare reach out. I couldn't be the one to cave. On the third day, the messages started pouring in. "Mom, the electricity bill is due. You're not really serious, right? Kevin? Mom's crying. Do you really want to do this to her? Aunt Linda families fight, but you don't just cut everyone off. Let's talk." I ignored them all. I knew the pattern: first guilt, then anger. And sure enough, the tone shifted. "Mom, you're so selfish. You think money makes you better than us. Kevin, I can't believe you'd abandon your family like this, after everything we've done for you. Selfish." That word again. It burned like acid, and I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. I tossed my phone onto the couch and closed my eyes, trying to block out the whirlwind of emotions. Then, just as I thought they might give up, there was a loud knock on my door. I knew who it was before I even opened it. Kevin stood on my porch, arms crossed, eyes filled with irritation. "You've made your point," he said. "Now stop being dramatic and fix this." I leaned against the doorframe, refusing to let his frustration affect me. "Fix what exactly?" He scoffed. "You know what? Mom's losing it. The bills are stacking up and you just walked away." I raised an eyebrow. "Why is that my problem?" "Because you're the one who always takes care of it," he snapped. "And maybe that's the problem," I replied, voice calm. "Maybe it's time someone else stepped up for a change." His face turned red. "Like who? Mom doesn't work. I have my own expenses." I folded my arms. "And I don't—" He hesitated. "It's not the same. You make more than all of us." "There it is," I said, not even surprised. "Just because I make more doesn't mean I owe you everything. I bought that house for Mom. I've covered every bill, every emergency. And instead of a thank you, I get told I'm nothing but a burden." Kevin looked away, clearly uncomfortable. "She didn't mean it." "Yes, she did. And no one defended me, not even you." Silence. For the first time, I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. "Mom's scared," he finally muttered. "She doesn't know how to handle things without you." I took a deep breath. Then maybe she should have thought about that before she humiliated me in front of everyone. Kevin's shoulders slumped, and for a moment he looked younger, like the little brother who used to follow me around, always asking for help with his homework. "I don't know what to do," he whispered. "You figure it out," I said softly, "because I'm done." And with that, I closed the door. I leaned against it, my chest aching, but I didn't cry. Not this time. For the first time in years, I chose myself. The first few days after that confrontation felt surreal. I'd spent years as the family's crutch, their fixer, their safety net. Cutting them off felt like stepping off a cliff and hoping I had wings. I kept my phone off most of the time, avoiding the flood of guilt-laden messages. But on the rare occasions I did turn it on, the tone had shifted. They had moved from guilt-tripping to outright anger. "Mom, unbelievable. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me. Kevin, you think you're better than us now? Just because you have a better job? Aunt Linda families argue, but abandoning us is extreme. You'll regret this." I should have felt something, anything. But I was empty, my emotional reserves long since drained by years of silent sacrifice. Instead of guilt, I felt a strange kind of freedom, like I had finally taken a deep breath after being underwater for too long. But then came the real test. One evening, just as I was settling into a quiet, peaceful night for once, my doorbell rang. I almost ignored it, but the persistent pounding made it clear they weren't leaving. I opened the door, and there she was. Mom standing on my porch, her face twisted in a mix of desperation and anger. "Are you just going to ignore your own family?" she snapped, pushing past me into the living room without so much as a greeting. She dropped her purse on my couch the way she used to when she visited unannounced to complain about bills I was already paying. I took a deep breath, closing the door behind her. "What do you want, Mom?" She spun to face me, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "I want my daughter back, the one who cared about her family." I folded my arms, leaning against the wall. "You mean the one who paid for everything while being treated like a walking ATM?" Her face flushed, and for a moment I thought she might actually apologize. But no, she doubled down. "I raised you, I sacrificed for you, and now you just walk away." I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Sacrificed? You mean the years you spent belittling my achievements, reminding me that I wasn't as important as my brother? That kind of sacrifice?" Her eyes flashed. "You're twisting things. Kevin's been struggling and you've always been the strong one. You're supposed to help." There it was. The family script, the same one that had been drilled into me for years. Be the responsible one. Be the caretaker. Be the one who never complains, never asks for anything. "Do you even hear yourself?" I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. "I bought you a house. I paid your bills. I made sure you never had to worry about a single thing. And what did I get in return? Public humiliation. You threw me under the bus at that family dinner and no one defended me." She shook her head, her lips pressed into a tight line. "You're being dramatic." There it was. That word. The one they always used when I tried to stand up for myself. Dramatic. I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "You want to talk about dramatic? You accused me of being a burden in front of the entire family. You made me feel like an outsider in my own home. And now you expect me to come back and keep funding your lifestyle?" She took a step back, clearly not expecting the backlash. I had never spoken to her like this before, never pushed back, never drawn a line. "I'm your mother," she whispered, a hint of actual hurt creeping into her voice. "Family is supposed to stick together." I felt a sharp, bitter twist in my chest. Family? You mean the people who watched you tear me down and said nothing? The people who only care about me when my wallet is open? That's not family. That's a financial arrangement. For a moment she just stared at me, her face pale, her hands trembling. And then, like a switch had been flipped, her expression hardened. "Fine," she snapped, grabbing her purse. "If that's how you want it, don't come crying to us when you're all alone. Don't expect us to welcome you back when you realize how selfish you've been." I opened the door for her, my heart pounding, my hands steady. "I won't." She stormed past me, her heels clicking angrily against the hardwood. I watched her go, closing the door behind her with a soft click. The silence that followed was deafening. I leaned against the door, my chest heaving, my mind racing. I had stood up to her, really stood up to her, and for the first time in my life, I hadn't backed down. For a brief, terrifying moment, I wondered if I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. But as the minutes ticked by, the anxiety started to fade, replaced by a quiet, simmering rage. I was done being the family doormat. I had chosen myself, and there was no going back. The days that followed my mother's dramatic exit were eerily quiet. I had expected more guilt-tripping, maybe even a sudden change of heart, but the silence felt more like the calm before a storm. I should have known better. It started small, rumors trickling back to me through extended family. My cousin Lisa called one evening, her voice low and hesitant. "Hey, I just wanted to check on you," she said, her words careful, like she was trying not to set off a landmine. "Aunt Mary's been saying some things." I leaned back on my couch, closing my eyes. Of course she has. What is it this time? "She's telling everyone you cut her off because you think you're too good for us now, that you've abandoned your family to live some fancy, selfish life." I felt my jaw clench, my fingers tightening around my phone. Did she mention the years I spent paying her bills? The mortgage, the groceries, the medical emergencies? Lisa hesitated. No, she left that part out. Of course she did. I let out a bitter laugh. Let her talk. I'm done caring what they think. Lisa sighed, her voice soft. "I get it, but you know how our family is. They'll twist this into something ugly." I forced a smile even though she couldn't see it. "They already have, Lisa, but thanks for the heads up." I hung up, my mind spinning. This was exactly what I had expected, and yet it still stung. They were painting me as the villain, the ungrateful daughter who had turned her back on her family. A week later, the real fallout began. I came home one night to find Kevin sitting on my porch, his car parked haphazardly across my driveway. I considered just driving away, but the look on his face stopped me. He looked like a man on the edge, his hair disheveled, eyes bloodshot. I stepped out of my car, keys clinking in my hand. "What do you want, Kevin?" He stood, his movements slow, like he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. "We need to talk." I crossed my arms, leaning against my car door. "About what?" He ran a hand through his hair, his jaw clenching. "Mom's losing it. The bills are piling up. She's stressed out and she's taking it out on me." I let out a dry chuckle. "Oh, so now you know what it feels like to be the family punching bag. Welcome to my world." He flinched, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "You don't get it," he said, his voice breaking. "She's blaming me for this. She keeps saying I should have stopped you, that I should have convinced you to come back." I took a deep breath, the cool night air filling my lungs. "And why exactly is that my problem?" He blinked, clearly not expecting that response. "Because you're the one who started this. You walked away and now everything's falling apart." I pushed off my car, taking a step toward him. "No, Kevin. This started years ago when she decided my only value was what I could pay for. When she treated me like an outsider in my own family. When you all sat there and let her humiliate me without a word of support. He looked away, his shoulders slumping. I didn't know it was that bad. I let out a bitter laugh. Of course you didn't. You never had to worry about it. You had me to fall back on just like Mom did. Kevin rubbed his face, his frustration clear. Look, I'm not saying she's right, but you know how she is. She's stubborn and now she's spiraling. I felt a flicker of pity, but I quickly smothered it. Then let her spiral. I'm not coming back. Kevin's face twisted in frustration. So that's it. You're just going to leave us to drown? I took a slow breath, steadying myself. I didn't leave you. You all pushed me away. I just finally decided to stop fighting for a place I was never welcome. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like he wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. Finally, he shook his head, stepping back. Fine, have it your way, but don't come crying to us when you're alone. I smiled, the weight on my chest finally starting to lift. I won't. I walked past him, unlocking my door and stepping inside without another word. I leaned against the door as it clicked shut behind me, my heart racing, my mind buzzing. I had just closed the door on the only family I had ever known, and it felt good. For the first time in my life, I felt free. The weeks that followed my confrontation with Kevin were strangely peaceful. I had expected a torrent of angry messages, guilt-tripping calls, maybe even a surprise visit from Mom, but instead there was just silence. At first it felt unsettling, like the eye of a storm. I kept bracing myself for the backlash, but as the days stretched into weeks, I realized something. They weren't reaching out because they didn't know how to control me anymore. I had taken away their leverage, the financial lifeline they had clung to for years, and now they were struggling to find a new way to manipulate me. Then one evening my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. Hello. There was a brief pause, and then a familiar voice crackled through the line. You really meant it, didn't you? I closed my eyes, gripping the phone a little tighter. Mom. She let out a bitter laugh. I didn't think you had it in you to walk away. I leaned back on my couch, staring at the ceiling. You pushed me away. She was silent for a moment, the only sound the faint hum of background noise on her end. Then she sighed, her tone shifting from anger to something almost resembling vulnerability. You don't understand how hard it's been, she said, her voice cracking. I'm drowning and you left. I felt a pang of guilt, but I quickly shoved it down. You had years to appreciate what I did for you. Years. And instead you tore me down, made me feel like a stranger in my own family. I'm done being your safety net. Her breath hitched. You're really going to let your own mother suffer? There it was, the weapon she had always used to keep me in line, guilt. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. Mom, I'm not responsible for you. I've been bailing you out for years, covering your bills, making sure you never had to worry about anything. And you still treated me like an outsider. That's not love, that's control. She fell silent again, the line crackling with unspoken tension. Finally she whispered, I never thought you'd turn your back on me. I closed my eyes, letting the words wash over me. For a moment I felt that familiar pang of regret, the urge to fix things, to make it all better. But then I remembered the countless nights I had stayed up balancing bills, stressing over expenses, feeling like an ATM instead of a daughter. No, Mom, I said quietly, my voice steady. You turned your back on me a long time ago. I'm just finally choosing myself. There was a long pause, and then she whispered, I hope you're happy. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I am. I hung up before she could say anything else, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. For the first time in years I had set a boundary, and it felt good. In the weeks that followed, I started to reclaim my life. I booked a solo trip to the mountains, something I had always dreamed of but never allowed myself to do. I spent weekends hiking, breathing in the crisp, clean air, letting the weight of my family's expectations melt away with each step. I reconnected with old friends, went to brunches without worrying about the cost, bought myself clothes without the nagging voice in my head telling me I was being selfish. I even splurged on a spa day, letting myself unwind for the first time in years. And then one evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sun dip below the horizon, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Kevin. I almost didn't answer, but something in my gut told me to pick up. Hey, he said, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. Hey. There was a long pause, the kind that felt heavy, like we were both struggling to find the right words. I screwed up, he finally said, his voice cracking. I should have had your back that night. I should have said something when Mom tore you down. I leaned back, the cool breeze brushing against my face. Why didn't you? He let out a shaky breath. Because I was scared. I didn't want to be the next target. And honestly, I thought you'd never walk away. You were always the strong one, the one who kept everything together. I closed my eyes, the weight of his words settling over me. That's the problem, Kevin. I was always the strong one, but no one ever had my back. I know, he whispered. I'm sorry, I see it now. Mom's been lashing out at me, and I finally understand what you went through. I took a deep breath, the familiar sting of old wounds surfacing. I'm not coming back, Kevin. I can't. I finally started living for myself, and I can't go back to being the family doormat. I get it, he said, his voice heavy with regret. I needed to say it. I'm sorry. I felt a strange sense of closure, like a weight had been lifted off my chest. Thank you. We said our goodbyes, and I hung up feeling lighter than I had in years. I leaned back in my chair, the cool evening air wrapping around me like a comforting embrace. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. I had chosen myself, and I wasn't looking back. Story 3. My parents gave my sister a luxury villa and left me an empty parking lot. You can always sleep under the stars, they snickered. I should have known this dinner was a setup. My parents never invited me over unless they had a reason, usually to remind me how much of a disappointment I was. Still, I went, stupidly hoping this time would be different. I work as a mechanic, nothing fancy, but I'm good at it. I fix things, I get paid, I mind my business. Meanwhile, my sister Lily is the perfect little angel. Never worked a real job in her life. If she accidentally burned the house down, they'd find a way to blame me. So I walk in, and Lily's already there, swirling her wine like she owns the place. Dad's at the table, flipping through his newspaper. Mom's in the kitchen, avoiding eye contact. Wow. Lily smirks. You actually showed up, didn't have a car to fix. I ignore her and sit down. Mom said it was important. Dad finally folds his newspaper. It is, he says flatly. We've decided to divide our assets. Lily lights up instantly. She already knows she's getting something big. Mom smiles at her. We're giving you the lake house, sweetheart. Lily gasps, acting like she just won the lottery. Oh my God, the one in Crystal Bay. Mom nods. Yes, honey, it's yours now. I sit there waiting for my turn. There's gotta be something for me too, right? Dad turns to me, his expression indifferent. And you, Jake, we're giving you the old parking lot on Cedar Street. Silence. I blink. The what? The lot, Mom says, like she's doing me a favor. It's land. You can figure something out. Lily bursts out laughing. Oh my God, that's hilarious. You can open a lemonade stand. Dad chuckles. It's been empty for years. Maybe you can rent it out. My stomach tightens, but I don't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I remember being 16, coming home from my first job at the garage, covered in grease but proud. I'd earned my first paycheck. I walked in to show them, only to hear Lily complaining that her car was too old and needed an upgrade. Dad didn't even glance at me. You're going to smell like oil your whole life, huh? He muttered. Mom had sighed. Well, at least he's useful. Maybe one day he'll fix your car for free, Lily. They bought her a brand new SUV the next week. And here we were years later, and nothing had changed. I take a slow breath and push back from the table. You're serious? Dad shrugs. Be grateful we're giving you anything. Lily snickers. Maybe one day you'll make enough money to buy a real property. Their laughter echoes in my head as I walk out. Fine. They thought they could humiliate me. I'd make sure they'd choke on their words. I stood in front of that parking lot the next morning, cracked pavement and weeds everywhere. I wasn't beaten, just more determined. They wanted me to fail, but I wasn't going to give them that. I filed for permits to allow food trucks. If it was just a slab of concrete, I'd make sure it was a profitable one. Within a week, I had contracts with some of the best food truck owners in town. Tacos, burgers, coffee, even vegan options for the hipster crowd. I took out a small loan from my boss at the garage, someone who actually believed in hard work. I used it to set up lights, seating, and banners. I wasn't just building a business, I was building proof that I wasn't the failure they thought I was. 3 weeks later, that empty lot was now a bustling food court, music lights and long lines of people waiting to eat. And that's when the fun started. About a month in, when the place had gone viral online, Mom showed up. She was in her designer coat, looking around like she'd stepped into a landfill. I was counting the register when she approached. So, this is what you did? She asked, looking unimpressed. Yeah, you gave me trash and I made it work. She scoffed. This isn't a real business, it's just a phase. I smirked. A phase that's making more money than Lily's entrepreneurial lifestyle. Her eyes narrowed. This doesn't seem stable. You should consider selling it. Selling it? I laughed. Why? So Lily can buy more designer bags. She stiffened. We just think it would be wise to give it to Lily, I interrupted. Yeah, I figured that's why you're here. She pursed her lips. Don't be childish, Jake. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just looked her in the eye and said, you gave me a lot that you thought was worthless. I made something of it. And now you want to take it back because I succeeded. Not happening. She glared, but I didn't flinch. Don't expect help when you fail, she snapped. I never needed your help, I shot back. She left, muttering under her breath. I watched her go, realizing something. This wasn't just about proving them wrong anymore. This was about proving to myself that I was capable even when the people who were supposed to believe in me never did. And I wasn't done yet. A month had passed since I turned that cracked, weed-strewn lot into the busiest food park in town. The place was alive every night, people laughing, music pumping, the smell of fresh tacos mixing with the aroma of barbecue. I'd added picnic tables, string lights, and even a small stage for local bands. The lot had gone from an eyesore to the hottest hangout spot in the city, and the money was rolling in faster than I could count. Then one Friday night, as the place was buzzing with life, I saw her, Lily. She was standing at the entrance, arms crossed, designer purse slung over her shoulder, looking completely out of place. For a moment, I wondered if she'd taken a wrong turn on her way to a boutique. I approached, wiping my hands on my apron. Lost Lily. She sneered, glancing around like the crowd was beneath her. I need to talk to you. I sighed, crossing my arms. Make it quick, I've got a line forming. She hesitated, her eyes flicking nervously to the bustling food trucks around us. Can we go somewhere private? I chuckled, shaking my head. Nope. If you've got something to say it here. She clenched her jaw, clearly annoyed. Fine. I need to sell the lake house. I raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised. The same lake house you bragged about for years? The one you said made you the envy of all your friends. What happened? Couldn't handle the property taxes. Her cheeks flushed and she dropped her gaze, suddenly finding the ground interesting. It's complicated, she muttered. Complicated. I smirked. Or is it just bad spending habits catching up to you? She shot me a glare. Look, just hear me out. I need $200,000 to cover debts before I can even list the place. I let out a low whistle. Wow, that's a big number even for you. What happened? Too many designer handbags? Exotic vacations? Or did your influencer career take a nosedive? Her hands tightened around the strap of her purse. Jake, I'm serious. Just say you'll help. I leaned against the edge of a nearby food truck, folding my arms. Help you? You mean like how you and Mom and Dad have always helped me by dumping an empty parking lot on me as a joke? She bit her lip, struggling to maintain her composure. I'll pay you back. I laughed loud enough that a few customers glanced our way. You'll pay me back with what? The lake house you can't even afford to keep. Her eyes flashed with anger, and for a moment I saw the real Lily, entitled, spoiled, and completely out of touch. She took a step closer, dropping her voice to a desperate whisper. Please, Jake, I need this. Just consider it. I straightened, letting my arms fall to my sides. No. Her mouth dropped open. What? I leaned in, lowering my voice to match hers. I said no. You and our parents laughed in my face. You dumped a slab of concrete on me and called it a gift. And now you expect me to bail you out? Her face turned bright red and I could see her fingers trembling. You're just going to let me fail. I straightened up, my expression hardening. That's not my problem, Lily. Maybe it's time you learned what it's like to actually struggle for once in your life. She took a step back, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I could see the panic building in her eyes, the realization that I wasn't going to fold just because she pouted and pleaded. I turned to walk away, but paused for a moment, looking back over my shoulder. Oh, and Lily. She flinched like she already knew what was coming. Next time you come begging for money, maybe leave the designer purse at home. It's a bit of a mixed message. I didn't wait for her response. I turned and walked back to my crew, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. For once I had the power and it felt damn good. But it wasn't over. I knew my family too well. They weren't just going to let this go. And sure enough, a few days later, Mom and Dad showed up at my lot looking like they'd bitten into a lemon. I was in the middle of overseeing a new seating area when I spotted them. They hovered near the entrance, clearly uncomfortable in their designer clothes, out of place among the food trucks and picnic tables. I finished my conversation with a vendor before strolling over, arms crossed. Well, if it isn't the two people who taught me the value of self-reliance. What brings you to my little slice of paradise? Mom pursed her lips, clearly struggling to keep her composure. We need to talk. I raised an eyebrow. About what? How you gave me a piece of garbage and now want to share in my success. Dad cleared his throat, looking down at his polished shoes like they might have stepped in something unpleasant. Jake, this isn't the time for jokes. I tilted my head, feigning innocence. Oh, I'm not joking. I'm just genuinely curious. What do you want? Mom took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders. Your father's business is struggling. We need a loan. I felt my jaw tighten, my teeth grinding together. They were actually serious. I let out a slow, bitter laugh, rubbing my chin as I looked between the two of them. You mean the same business you've poured money into for years while telling me I'd never amount to anything? The one you prioritized over your own son's future, that business. Mom flinched, her eyes dropping to the ground. We're family, Jake. Family helps each other. I scoffed, shaking my head. Family? You mean the family that handed my sister a lake house and gave me a slab of concrete? The family that laughed in my face when I said I'd make something of myself? Dad's jaw clenched, a vein throbbing in his temple. Don't be childish, Jake. We're in a tough spot. I crossed my arms, my eyes narrowing. You made your choices. You picked your golden child. You wrote me off. And now when things are falling apart, you come crawling back to me. No, not this time. Mom opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off, my voice cold as steel. You taught me to stand on my own, remember? Well, I took your lesson to heart. I don't owe you anything. I turned my back on them, walking away without another word, their stunned silence trailing behind me. I felt a rush of satisfaction, a sense of justice I hadn't known I needed. As I walked back toward my bustling lot, I could still feel their eyes on me, burning with a mix of shock, shame, and disbelief. They thought they could break me, that I'd always be the kid in the shadow of their perfect daughter. But they were wrong. I was just getting started. I thought that was the end of it. I had made my point, drawn my line in the sand, and walked away. But I should have known better. People like my parents and Lily don't just accept a loss, they plot. And soon enough, they came back, claws out and desperate. It started small with a flood of one-star reviews on my business page. I was scrolling through my phone one morning when I noticed the sudden drop in my average rating. 1 star, 1 star, 1 star. The comments were all the same, anonymous complaints about rude service, dirty tables, and overpriced food. Don't waste your time, one read. The owner is arrogant and ungrateful. I'd rather eat from a gas station hot dog stand. I chuckled. Nice try, Mom. I could picture her sitting in her pristine kitchen, angrily typing out fake reviews between sips of her overpriced herbal tea, probably with Lily feeding her lines. But I brushed it off. If anything, it gave me a little extra fire. Then a city inspector showed up. Anonymous complaint, he said, looking almost apologetic as he walked through my food park, clipboard in hand. Something about your permits not being up to code. I raised an eyebrow. Anonymous? Huh? Let me guess, middle-aged woman with a taste for designer handbags. He tried not to smile. Can't say. Just doing my job. I watched him check the wiring, the plumbing, even the spacing between tables. But I had done my homework. My permits were ironclad, every regulation double-checked and signed off by the city months ago. After an hour, he handed me a clean bill of health, tipping his hat as he left. Looks good here. Keep up the good work. I thought that would be the end of it. But no, they weren't done. The next week, I got a letter from the city saying someone had filed a noise complaint against my lot. Then another, this time, claiming my lighting was a traffic hazard. Then another accusing me of improperly disposing of waste. I knew exactly who was behind it. They were trying to drown me in red tape, suffocate my business before it could grow any bigger. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. I fought back. I hired a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Clara, who knew every loophole in the city's books. Together we went over every complaint, every permit, every regulation. By the time we were done, my business was so airtight it could survive a hurricane. But I didn't just play defense. I went on the offensive. I started a marketing blitz, special events, live music nights, VIP tasting menus. I reached out to local influencers, inviting them to my lot for free meals and exclusive interviews. I doubled down on social media, drowning out the fake reviews with genuine praise and glowing testimonials. And it worked. My lot's popularity exploded. The crowds got bigger, the lines longer. What my parents had tried to use against me only made my business stronger. Then one Friday night, the place was packed, the energy buzzing, and I spotted her, Lily. She was standing at the edge of the lot, her hair a mess, eyes slightly wild, and a half-empty glass of wine in her hand. For a second, I thought she might turn and leave. But then she staggered forward, swaying slightly on her high heels, her face twisted with a mix of anger and desperation. Jake, she yelled, cutting through the noise of the crowd. A few heads turned curious. I sighed, mentally bracing myself for whatever drama she was about to unleash. She stumbled closer, eyes locking onto me like a heat-seeking missile. You think you're better than us? Now, she spat, her voice loud enough to turn more heads. You think you're some big shot? I crossed my arms, my voice calm. Lily, you're drunk. Go home. She ignored me, stepping closer, her glass sloshing wine onto the pavement. You think you're so great running this place, making money, acting like you're better than us? I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my cool. Lily, I'm not doing this with you. Walk away. She laughed, a high, bitter sound that cut through the music. Oh, I'm not walking away, Jake. I'm done playing nice. She took a step closer, her face inches from mine, her eyes glassy. You're nothing. You're still that greasy kid who used to beg for scraps. You're a joke. I took a slow breath, feeling the heat rise in my chest. All right, Lily. You want to do this here in front of everyone? Fine. But remember, you picked this fight. Before she could respond, one of my security guys stepped in, a burly ex-Marine I'd hired to keep the peace. Is there a problem here? He asked, his tone low and firm. Lily blinked, her confidence wavering. She glanced around, suddenly aware of the dozens of eyes on her, the cameras flashing, the phones recording. I leaned in, dropping my voice. Leave, Lily, before you do something you can't take back. Her face flushed, and for a moment I thought she might actually throw her drink at me. But then she stumbled back, muttering something under her breath before turning and vanishing into the crowd, her heels clacking angrily against the pavement. I watched her go, the adrenaline still buzzing in my veins. She had tried to humiliate me, to drag me back down to where she thought I belonged. But I wasn't that kid anymore. I had built something real, something they couldn't take away, and I wasn't about to let them ruin it. As the night wore on, the music got louder, the lines got longer, and the smell of fresh food filled the air. I took a deep breath, letting the satisfaction wash over me. They had tried to break me, to tear down what I had built, but I was still standing, and I was just getting started. I thought the worst was behind me. I had faced down my parents, shut down their petty sabotage, and even weathered Lily's drunken meltdown. I had made my stand and my business was thriving, but I should have known better. My family wasn't just going to slink away and lick their wounds. They were coming for me with one final desperate strike. It started with a phone call. I was in my office, a converted shipping container at the edge of my bustling lot, when my phone buzzed. Mom. I stared at the screen for a second before swiping it to silent. A minute later, another call, then another. I smirked. They needed something. That weekend, I was overseeing a new shipment of picnic tables when I saw them. Mom, Dad, and Lily standing at the entrance, looking completely out of place. Mom in her designer coat, Dad in his polished loafers, and Lily with her oversized sunglasses, probably to hide the bags under her eyes. They hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, as if the very air around my lot was beneath them. I finished up with the delivery guys before strolling over, my hands in my pockets. Well, if it isn't my loving family, to what do I owe this visit? Mom stepped forward, her lips pressed into a thin line. Jake, we need to talk. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, about what? How you tried to bury my business with fake reviews and anonymous complaints. Or maybe how Lily tried to make a scene in front of my customers. Lily crossed her arms, her face flushing red, but she kept her mouth shut for once. Dad cleared his throat, avoiding my eyes. Jake, this isn't about the past. We need your help. I tilted my head, pretending to think. Oh, you need my help? Now that's rich. Mom's face tightened and she forced a thin smile. We're family, Jake. Family supports each other. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Family? You mean the same family that handed my sister a mansion and gave me a slab of concrete as a joke? The same family that mocked me for being a mechanic while handing Lily everything on a silver platter? That family. Mom's jaw tightened and I saw her knuckles whiten as she clutched her purse. We made a mistake, Jake. We see that now. But your father's business is in trouble. We're struggling to keep the house. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. They were finally getting a taste of what they had put me through. The tables had turned and they knew it. I crossed my arms, my expression hardening. And you think I'm just going to hand over my hard-earned money because we share some DNA? Is that it? Dad stepped forward, his eyes desperate. Jake, we're drowning. The business is failing and the bank is threatening to take the house. We need a loan. I stared at him for a long moment, the memories of their years of neglect and dismissal flashing through my mind. The times they had laughed at me, belittled my work, and treated me like an afterthought. Finally, I spoke, my voice low and cold. You made your choices. You picked your golden child. You wrote me off. And now when things are falling apart, you come crawling back to me. Mom opened her mouth, but I cut her off, my words like a hammer. You taught me to stand on my own. You pushed me to prove myself, to make something out of nothing. Well, I did. And now you want me to bail you out? Lily stepped forward, her voice shaking. Jake, please, you're doing so well. You can afford it. I shook my head, my jaw tightening. You have no idea what I can afford, Lily. And even if I could, I wouldn't give you a cent. Not after everything you've done. Dad's face turned red, his fists clenching. We're your family, Jake. You owe us. I felt a flicker of rage, a fire that had been smoldering for years finally igniting. I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a cold, dangerous whisper. No, I don't owe you anything. Not a single cent. You threw me away, treated me like trash, and now that I've made something of myself, you want a piece of it? No, not this time. I turned, my heart pounding, and started walking away, but then I stopped, glancing back over my shoulder. Oh, and just so you know, I added my voice loud enough to make a few nearby customers glance our way. I bought the lake house. Their eyes went wide, the color draining from their faces. What Mom whispered, her voice shaking. I smirked. Yeah, the bank foreclosed on it last month. I bought it at auction. So if you're planning on crashing there when you lose the house, don't bother. It's mine now. They stood there frozen, their world crumbling around them. I watched them for a moment, letting the weight of my words sink in before turning and walking back into my lot, the sound of the crowd swallowing their stunned silence. I had done it. I had turned their petty cruelty into my greatest strength. I had taken the lot they thought was worthless and built an empire. And now I owned the house they had cherished, the one they had held over my head for years. As I stepped back into the warmth of the food park, the music thumping in my ears, the smell of fresh food filling my lungs, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. They had tried to break me, to drag me back into the shadows, but I had risen above it. I had proven them wrong, not just to them, but to myself. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. I glanced back one last time, catching a glimpse of them as they stumbled away, their heads bowed, their perfect world shattered. I smiled, turning my back on them for good. I had won.